Hello, my name's Julie Williams. I'm a registered migration agent with Migration Downunder, and we're getting a lot of inquiries at the moment about offshore processing. What's happening to offshore processing whilst COVID-19 pandemic is on? As we're all aware, there are travel restrictions all around the globe, including Australia, and the travel exemptions for Australia, or travel bans I should say, or restrictions, include all temporary visa holders, with some exceptions. Now, anyone who is an Australian citizen, permanent resident, or is the partner of an Australian citizen or permanent resident and usually resides in Australia can apply for a travel exemption. Anybody else, it's quite difficult to achieve a positive outcome. However, if you are a de facto or married spouse of an Australian citizen or resident, and you are actually living offshore, then there are possibilities of being able to get the travel exemption. But please be aware that you will need to provide quite extensive evidence to support that you are living together with your Australian citizen or permanent resident partner. Now, a lot of people have applied for visas to come to Australia, either on a temporary or permanent basis, and are wondering what's happening with the processing. Now, there's processing times advertised on the website, and that's just a general guide. Now, when they say processing, it doesn't actually take, for example, say it says 12 months for processing a 309 or a 300 visa. When they do state that, it doesn't mean that they're going to spend 12 months looking at your application. It really means that it's going to take 12 months before a case officer is actually allocated and going to view that visa. Until then, your application just sits in the queue waiting to be allocated. A lot of people are asking, why haven't I heard anything? Why hasn't the department contacted me? Well, the reason being is that they don't until they're ready to look at your application. They have got such a huge number, a big volume of applications that are pending, and only so many staff being able to assist with the processing. So therefore, when it states 12, 24 months, then that's how long it's going to take until an actual person is physically going to access your file and start actively reviewing it. And then they'll start liaising with you via email. So until that happens, there is nothing, unfortunately, you can do. I can understand and I hear your frustration, but there really is nothing that can be done. And it's highlighted or heightened, I think, in the time that we're currently in this pandemic, where there are restrictions and that you can't freely travel to Australia whilst waiting for that processing of the visa. Now, some questions, there's a lot of questions. What's happening with the processing? Are they still processing offshore applications? Well, I guess the answer to that is yes and no. Any temporary visa application, forget it, because temporary residents can't enter. So if you've applied for an offshore visitor visa, which the system at the moment is not allowing you to even do, or a student visa, then that's not going to be actively processed because you're not going to be able to enter Australia. Therefore, they're not going to process it or grant it, because otherwise it will be wasted and you won't be able to come in. The same with working holiday visas. You're not able to apply at the moment because there is no ability to enter once that visa is granted. And once a visa is granted, it usually comes with time limitations of when you can enter Australia. Which leads me on to the next question of those people that have applied or hold a subclass 300 prospective marriage visa. Now, there's some people that have already been granted that subclass 300 visa. They've got a request to travel within a certain time frame, but they can't because there is a current travel ban. It might be out of your own country, that you're not permitted to leave your own country. And it certainly is with Australia, as you'll see on the website, that subclass 300 holders can't actually travel to Australia. However, there is perhaps a travel exemption that you can obtain to show, the relationship between you and your partner when you're seeking to get married, when your visa was granted, when it expires, and to get the travel exemption to show that you've been in a relationship for quite an extensive period of time. You've had your 300 granted, and you really do want to travel, be able to travel and be with your partner in Australia as your visa has allowed you to do. So that is possible. The other thing is, if you can't travel because your country is not allowing you to depart before the cut-off date, then you need to be able to contact the department and provide them the evidence to show that it is not possible that you can travel. There might be compassionate, compelling reasons, or there might simply be a ban from your country allowing you to depart. So there is the possibility of being able to extend that travel limit, but not beyond the expiry of the visa. So, for example, if your visa expires on the 30th of November, but you must enter Australia by no later than the 30th of September, there may be an exemption to be able to lift that 30th of September up until the expiry of your visa. But unfortunately, if you don't travel or enter before the expiry of your visa, that 300 application is going to just slide away. So you don't want to waste that money that you've already spent on that. So start looking in that. If you've done it yourself, then you'll need to contact the processing centre yourself. If you've used another agent, then as much as we love hearing from you, we can't really do anything for you if you've used another agent. If you've used another agent with your application, that's great, but go and ask them, because they should be keeping you up to date and informed with the various processing. But basically, yeah, don't bother trying to come here on a temporary visa because it's not possible. Don't bother applying because it's not possible. The subclass 300, I don't really recommend that you apply. You can certainly do so, but it's not actively being processed at the moment because upon grant, you can't enter. So therefore, they're not actively processing the 300 visas. Are they still actively processing all offshore applications like the subclass 309? Yes, they are. It might be a little slower than usual, but look, the Department of Home Affairs has been affected like all other businesses around the world, and a lot of their resources have been put into other areas of the department, and there is a lot less people processing the visas, and there's been staff sort of moved around, but the number of applications still continue. So that's why the delay, and why possibly you haven't heard within the time frame that you were expecting. But don't despair. The application certainly hasn't been forgotten. I can understand your frustration. It's just being delayed. Now, with those that are applying for perhaps a skilled visa, they aren't actively processing offshore applications. They are only looking at those already here in Australia for the 189 and the 190. If you are looking at coming out on a temporary work visa, perhaps a 482, you may have an employer that's offered employment for you. Once again, that's not actively being processed either, unless you're in an area of critical need. Critical need is not necessarily classified into one particular area, but from experience we can see that critical need is healthcare workers, so perhaps nurses, aged care workers, disability workers. They're certainly being actively processed. Engineers, people that are going to be able to assist the economy and the current circumstances surrounding the pandemic are those applications that are looking at. But look, the travel restrictions I think are going to be here for a little while yet. The borders within Australia are still yet to be open, so until that happens, it's going to delay the process of international borders. And don't be surprised if the international borders, don't open until early next year. But I guess we've just got to stay. No one really knows the definitive answer. The government's just sort of sitting back, watching and seeing not only how the pandemic is going here in Australia, but worldwide. And until there's a vaccine and until the decline of all coronavirus cases around the world, then we're not going to see any significant movement with travel restrictions being lifted for Australia. I trust that helps you answer your questions, and we look forward to being able to be of further assistance.